I am Rob Edwards. I'm CEO of the NEA, which is the Neurodiversity and Entrepreneurship Association. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about what led me to set up the association and what we've been doing to work with neurodivergent business owners and entrepreneurs, particularly a programme that we've just finished that was funded by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So I live just outside Bradford, so it has a Yorkshire context today. There we go. So, depending on the data that you look at, we know that about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people in general society are neurodivergent. So people who might be autistic, might have ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, Tourette's. Apart from us, the Edwardses, so we buck that trend quite a lot. Basically, my wife got her ADHD diagnosis and then we went like dominoes. So Martha, our eldest daughter, she also got her ADHD diagnosis. Before all of that, Jake there, he was now 12. When he was 4, he got his autism diagnosis. And that led us into finding out everything that we could about autism, everything more broadly about neurodiversity as well. Then I got my ADHD diagnosis. And for a long time, Beth, who's in the front here, our youngest daughter, was this tiny little neurotypical island in our family. But now she's going for autism assessment, so we got her in the end. So now my background is in academic publishing to start with, and then more and more in enterprise and entrepreneurship education. And I finished my MBA about 10 years ago and had the sort of, the academic bit between my teeth and thought, I know, I'll go on to do a PhD. And I wanted to look at what that sort of overlap looked like between the worlds of neurodiversity and the worlds of entrepreneurship and enterprise. And couldn't really find a lot that was out there. So there's research going way back, which we'll have a look at, about how those two worlds collide and the alignment that's there as well, and how some of neurodivergent qualities lend themselves really well to what we think about as having an entrepreneurial mindset and those sort of talents as well. But there was nothing that seemed to offer practical help, I suppose, to neurodivergent entrepreneurs like myself. So, typical ADHD, I thought, I know, I'll set something up. So, hence the NEA, which has now been running for just about 18 months as a CIC, social enterprise, but that's a separate conversation. So, very broadly, this is an excellent flower that I like to share with people. So this is put together by Genius Within, who again are a fantastic company if you're looking for resources around neurodiversity. And as you can see, we've got all of our neurodivergent conditions around, but then the little blue bits in between speak to a lot of what we'd see as real advantages, real benefits to an entrepreneur and to a business owner. So there's things in there like creativity, so people who are perhaps able to spot gaps in markets and in sectors where not everybody can see them. We've got honesty, so being genuine, being authentic. Again, we know from a lot of literature as well that that's a key benefit in terms of running a business and in terms of being an entrepreneur. There's things as well like hyperfocus, which is something that I feel I have as well, where you're able to get through work in a couple of hours as opposed to a full day that it might take other people to do it, but it does come at a bit of an expense as well, which we'll also touch upon. And things there about that sort of innovative thinking as well, and that resilience to push on through all of the barriers, possibly because your business is your passion project, as it is with most business owners and entrepreneurs, but it's that special subject, which I think sometimes, if you're neurodivergent, has a different context. And it's something that you really want to see happen, and in spite of all the pushback and the barriers and things that you might come across, you keep on going. And then we're talking very much about sort of medical definitions of neurodiversity, neurodivergent conditions, and it's not that easy. It's very messy as definitions of entrepreneurship and enterprise are really. So we know that there's quite a lot of overlap in terms of that sort of medical model of conditions as well. So I have an ADHD diagnosis, which has an inattentive presentation rather than hyperactive, which means that I do find it a bit of a struggle to keep my attention on things. But when I do it, I'm really, really good at it, but then it wipes me out for the day afterwards. So having an appreciation of that, I think, makes me a better business owner for the business that I run myself. But it's, as we say, quite a sort of messy place as well to play around in. And as I said, there has been academic research, so particularly around ADHD, and that sort of being able to spot those gaps and being able to then fill that with a service or a product. Lots of things, as we'll see here, about being able to keep on going in the face of adversity and in face of challenges. So we are starting to see a lot more coming through as well. So we've got people like Johan Wiklund, who I don't think I've got there, but he's doing lots of work, particularly around ADHD, and looking at how those two worlds come together and the benefits that it can have on both sides. Okay, so in terms of me, so the way that I think my ADHD affects me, I do think I'm very creative. I do think I can come up with 100,000 ideas for things. All through today, I've just been sat there thinking, right, we'll look at this next, and yeah, my company could do that, and we'll do a joint venture, and we'll take over the world. And that is fantastic in terms of how I run my business, which I've had for about 12 years now. I'm better at that sort of blue sky thinking, so huge, great big sort of paint strokes of where I think the business will be heading, but when it comes to the actual detail of how that is going to be implemented and the operational side of things, I get really bored with that. So that's when I need to bring in other people who have particular strength around that. As I've said, around hyper-focus, so I do think that I'm able to get a lot shifted, a lot of work done when I'm really in the zone. And again, I put a lot of that down to my ADHD. And enthusiasm for projects. So if anybody comes to me with a business idea today, then I can guarantee I will make you feel like it's the best business idea I've ever heard in my life. And by the time I've left, I'll either have forgotten about it, or I will be bored with it and think, oh, how are we going to do that then? And go on to the next shiny thing. So I know now I've got enough self-realization since I got my diagnosis about 3 years ago that that is how I function. And so I have to incorporate that into my running of my business. And on the sort of the downside, I suppose, it does feel like I've got 100,000 plates spinning in my head at any one time, and that's exhausting. I struggle with that whole completing and finishing, getting stuff across the line. I've got so many projects I could tell you about that are at about sort of 72% and never quite pushed over the line to 100%. Well, that's in the past, obviously. I'll talk about how it's radically different now. But it's led to a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety in my life, a lot of thinking that I was lazy. So all the way through school, I started off in employment, obviously, just feeling that I was really sort of muddle-headed somehow, and that I didn't have that sort of defined thinking, I suppose, in terms of what I wanted to do. And it felt like, what would I say? I think it made me question whether I could actually run my own business, because I didn't think that person was me. I just thought I would have far too many ideas whizzing around my head and I wouldn't actually get anything done. And as I say, essentially I was just a bit idle. And it's led to so much procrastination. So a lot of what neurodivergent people will feel is this perfectionism. So if something isn't 100% perfect, then it's really hard to actually get it started. And is it even worth progressing? Is it even worth doing? And I think in terms of the business context, that can be really difficult. Rejection. So we'll talk a little bit later about how that can also be quite a difficult challenge for people who are neurodivergent as well, especially running their own business. And again, this sort of putting things off and basically feeling like you're failing all the time. And I'm not saying that is just exclusive to neurodivergent business owners, obviously, but I think it's a heightened sense of that. And that seems to be certainly my personal experience, but also from some of the business owners that we're working with. So things that work for me. So this is Claire, my business coach, and I've been working with her for about 2 years now. And just having that monthly accountability session with her, making sure that I've done everything that I said I was going to do the month before, has just been an absolute game changer for me. So I now have projects that I actually complete and that I get across the finishing line, which is radically different for me. And being part of a bigger, wider community as well. So I've always been part of that sort of enterprise community in various different roles. But now bringing together the worlds of neurodiversity and entrepreneurship, and some of the people who I've met through that has just been fantastic, and knowing that I'm not on my own with it as well has been really important. We've done some work, as you can see there, with universities as well. So as I said, my background is in that sort of academic world. And I think there's more and more coming through now about how, in terms of enterprise education, we best support neurodivergent students and graduates. And once they've left the university context as well, how we're making sure that they can actually thrive in business and in self-employment. So some really important network partners there for us as well. We've done a business support program with the Freelancer Club as well, which was specifically a sort of 12-month program of coaching and training and things with them that had a bit of a twist in terms of neurodivergent approach as well, and that's been really popular and really successful. And we've worked with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, as I said, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. So, as I said, we know, depending on the data, about 15 or 20% of the UK population are neurodivergent. And we also know that around 15% of people who declare themselves as self-employed are also registered as disabled. But what we don't really know in terms of that self-employment space, out of the 4.2 million people, is how that 17% breaks down in terms of people who might be neurodivergent. And admittedly, we're dealing with really messy concepts. So whether people classify themselves as neurodivergent, whether they classify themselves as entrepreneurs, again, that's a whole other conversation, or whether they prefer to be thought of as business owners. So it's a sort of messy world. And I think that what we're trying to do with the NEA is to get better data so that we can start to see what our sort of benchmarks look like and what interventions, if you like, might actually be working and might actually be successful. And as Jonathan was saying, in terms of mentors as well, we find that obviously we've got Richard Branson, who's doing a lot in terms of that sort of dyslexic entrepreneur insight and support. But in terms of the case studies that are out there, there's a bit of a dearth in terms of neurodivergent business owners. So again, that's something that we want to try and fix. So in the academic space, the sort of business school space, we're working on collections of case studies, like teaching case studies, with neurodivergent protagonists, so that students and graduates can actually see themselves in those examples that are being taught. And also more broadly as well with the business owners that we're supporting, just to get their stories elevated and to really showcase the great stuff that they're doing. And also look at where we can find funding as well for more academic research in the space, because there's so much to go at. And as I say, in terms of the research that's already published, it does tend to have an ADHD angle perspective. And that's, you know, we've got around 10% of the population who are dyslexic and who are doing fantastic entrepreneurship work. So there's a lot more that could be done, I think. And so that's another mountain that we've set ourselves to climb. So very broadly, we have these three areas, as I've said, that we want to focus on. So the one is the academic research side of things, so getting the funding in for that, looking at more partnerships with business schools and with universities as well, and looking at what that research base looks like and what are the new trends that need funding and support. And then we also work on the ground as well with neurodivergent business owners. I'll come on to that in a little bit more depth. And we're also starting to have conversations in terms of how policy and practice can be influenced and can be better put in place for neurodivergent business owners as well. And we're based in the UK, so most of our work is done over here at the moment. But we're also starting to see how we can do things in India at the moment, Australia as well, where that sort of, particularly in the policy space, the neurodivergent conversation is far more advanced than we are in this country. So there's lots of really interesting comparative studies, I think, that we can also be looking at. And we had our first conference as well in April, and that brought together a lot of academics, a lot of coaching experts, a lot of mentors, and tried to sort of look at where the field might be heading in terms of academia, but also in terms of the extra support that we might want to give to business owners. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the programme that we've just finished. So this was a competitive bid that West Yorkshire Combined Authority put out, and they had a feeling that there were areas of the population where they needed to be doing better work in terms of business support. So there was one that was specifically about how neurodivergent business owners are accessing the business support that the Combined Authority was offering. And we bid for that, and we got it. So we got a grant of £25,000, which was fantastic, and it helped us to support a group of 20 neurodivergent business owners or entrepreneurs or people who had a business idea that they wanted to take forward. And this was from our first in-person meeting, these photos on the top. And I think when we first got the people together, I was expecting lots of conversations about business model canvases and marketing plans and all your usual bread and butter stuff for a business school. And instead it turned into a really emotional day where people were sharing really tough stories that they'd been, particularly if they'd been in a sort of corporate setting, if they'd been employed before, and working in an environment that in most cases isn't really fit for neurodivergent people. So as lovely as the venue in here, there's a lot of sensory issues going on in terms of the lighting and some of the sound and things. And you're looking at about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people in the population. So in this room as a sample, where this, whether they feel it explicitly or not, is going to be having an effect on them. And most of my sort of working experience in academic publishing as well, I was in huge open plan offices. You know, there were so many different conversations going on at any one time. Phones were ringing, faxes were clattering back in the day. And the lighting was really harsh. And obviously at that time I hadn't realized that I had ADHD. But thinking back now, the sort of time that it took me after being in the office for a whole day to sort of recharge and to recover almost was huge. It's far sort of disproportionate to the time that I was actually in the office. And that was a lot of the stories that were coming through from the people who were on the cohort or on the programme. A lot about how they'd been off with stress, a lot of people who'd had panic attacks, lots of people who just really hit a wall of overwhelm and just couldn't go on. And had then been signed off sick, and had then felt better because they weren't in that working environment, but then hurled themselves back into it and then got sick again. So we had lots of people who had chosen self-employment and entrepreneurship as a means of escape from that organisational context. And looking back now, sort of reevaluating my whole working life after getting my diagnosis, I've realised that's totally what I was doing. And I just think I've now got the flexibility and I've now got that sort of, what would I say, that headspace, that breathing space, just to be able to carve out what I want to do with my working life rather than having to fit into something that wasn't built for me. And for the 20 neurodivergent business owners, they had a coach, like I work with Claire, who was there every month for them, who was neurodivergent themselves. So it sort of circumvented a lot of those conversations about how they were affected by overwhelm, how they just had got to the point where they couldn't function in terms of their whole life, as opposed, not just their business, and just needed time out. And it saved a lot of those conversations, I think, knowing that someone else was probably going through similar things to you. Quarterly mentoring as well we gave them. And also training, which was specifically around more neurodivergent things. So things around dealing with overwhelm, things about prioritizing workloads, things about rejection, sensitivity as well, which is a huge piece as well for a lot of neurodivergent people. And also, I think the big benefit out of everything was probably the group dynamics and getting them together in a tribe where they felt that it was a safe space where they could just share a lot of these experiences without feeling judged, without feeling like they were crazy. And the program itself now, that finished at the end of July, but that group is still in touch. So we've got WhatsApp groups, we've got LinkedIn groups, And it's still somewhere where you can go just to get a bit of advice, or if you're feeling like your head's about to explode, you've got other people that you can talk to who are in a similar boat. And we're now looking for other opportunities to run similar cohorts as well around the UK and overseas. In terms of well-being, as I've said, a lot of the people on the cohort, on the programme, reported that their well-being and their mental health had really suffered in terms of things like this feeling of imposter syndrome, which is obviously something that most business owners have at any one time, but seems particularly heightened as well amongst neurodivergent people. This RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, again, not exclusive to neurodivergent people, but it's a sort of heightened sense of feeling rejected. So that can be from the smallest bit of criticism from someone who you put forward your business idea and you get a bit of pushback or you get constructive criticism. The way that that can then spiral in a neurodivergent mind and make you think that your whole business idea just is never going to work and that you need to go right back to the drawing board, that amongst our cohort was huge. And that's sort of being aware of that and being aware that it was something that other people in the group were also struggling with was really important for them as well. And just general challenges of fitting into a world which is not built for neurodivergent people, you know? So one of the cohort who actually set up her business while she was on the programme was looking at how to make spaces more neurodivergent friendly. So we had our last in-person meeting, and to get a free venue, we said we could give you this audit of your space. And the report that she produced was just pages and pages and pages. And it was a beautiful space, you know, it was open. But there were little changes that would have made such a difference to neurodivergent people being in it, but also would have been of benefit to everybody, whether they're neurodivergent or not. And it's little changes. So things like giving people a photo of the venue before they arrive at places, telling people exactly what to expect, and hopefully reducing some of that stress and anxiety before they even get to a place. So yeah, the world isn't really built for us, although things are getting better. And this idea of self-worth, which was touched upon earlier as well, and that sort of personal value. So again, we were dealing with a lot of people who feel they've been buffeted around in an organizational context and have never really been heard, never really fitted in, always felt that they lacked something that everybody else seemed to have. In a magic sort of way, people seem to intuit the sort of culture of work and the unspoken things that go on in an office, for example, and feeling like they were always outliers and didn't really have a space. So again, we've got some lovely testimonials there as well, but I think the big thing for me out of the program that we've run was, as I say, the value of being part of this group and of being heard and knowing that you weren't going to be dismissed, because so many people in our group had already felt that in a work context. And I think that's it. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.